Hey girls, it's me again. I believe this is probably my last Sunday school recording, and or at least remotely from my home. It is August the 19th, and we're getting ready to do our final study in Proverbs, and then we'll have two more sessions where we are going to study the Song of Solomon. So we're not letting go of old King Solomon just yet, but we are going to be wrapping Proverbs up today in session 11. And I'm coming to you from what I fondly refer to as my bluebird sanctuary. And all in the world that is an area just down from the house where I have, I have a Missouri a bird certified bluebird sanctuary, where I've got about 8 bluebird houses, and they're set up to specifications, and I have generally on an average every year 100% occupancy. I keep them cleaned out, and then I get them ready for the bluebirds the next year, and that's a sign I'm getting old, I guess, that I like birds and I'm watching birds. And so anyway, let's jump into this last section in Proverbs. I am looking so forward to kicking off Song of Solomon on Sunday morning, this coming Sunday in person. Hopefully we'll figure out some way to go ahead and record this for you folks that are going to stay home still and keeping the social distancing going, or maybe you're compromised or gone way away from here and you're watching us. So we'll figure out some way to maybe keep this going, even if we record the actual lesson in the Sunday school room Sunday morning. So let's jump in. The title of the lesson today is called Finding Honor. This is our final lesson in Proverbs, so we're going to wrap it up, and there is absolutely no better way than with chapter 31 of Proverbs. God recognizes that those who faithfully demonstrate His wisdom in their lives. Now, most of us go through our days and we carry out our tasks without thinking somebody may be watching us. So we would be surprised if we found out somebody had been watching us while we were going through the day. We would even be more shocked if our observer addressed how we managed our time, and the specific challenges that we faced. So in Proverbs 31, a king named Lemuel penned this magnificent poem in honor of a wise and a noble wife. Now, wives are too often the unsung heroes of successful families. And by studying this passage today, we will discover that God recognizes those who faithfully demonstrate His wisdom. So the background for our scriptures are chapter 30, verse 1, all the way through chapter 31 and ending in verse 31, which is the end of Proverbs. So Proverbs 30, chapter 1 through 31, chapter 31, is not attributed to Solomon, other than it being added to his collection of wisdom sayings. Now, chapter 30 identifies itself as the words of Agor, son of Jacob, that were spoken as an oration in Ithiel and Ucal. But chapter 31 is attributed to King Lemuel and is described as a pronouncement that his mother taught him. Well, God bless those godly mothers, because this has been placed in the book of Proverbs for perpetuity. Nothing further is known about the background of any of these people. Lemuel, whose name means devoted to God, is identified as a king, yet he was evidently not a king in Israel. Some Bible scholars suggest that Lemuel may have ruled in a kingdom that traded with Israel and may have become a devoted worshiper of Israel's God. So in Proverbs chapter 30, verses 1 through 33 records good counsel for everyone. Agur revealed his humility. Then he touted the value and the virtues and not being extremely prosperous or excessively poor. He recorded other candid observations on life, but he refrained from excessively pressing the lessons that he discerned. Now in Proverbs chapter 31, first 9 verses, now they focus on the wise counsel for governing that Lemuel's mother gave to the king. She warned, now this is the mom talking, that loose morality would not lead to good government. Well, hello, can we get a witness? Somebody needs to send the first 9 verses of Proverbs chapter 31 to Congress. She also noted that while strong drink might have limited medicinal value for some despondent individuals, it was not wise for rulers to depend on it. It could easily impair a ruler's sense of law and his sense of justice. So she emphasized now that a king's primary responsibility is to establish justice for all his subjects and to defend, in particular, the rights of the oppressed and the needy. Sounds like a pretty good old broad to me. So now in Proverbs chapter 31, verses 10 through 31, which is ultimately the focus of today's lesson, is this magnificent, skillfully crafted poem that describes and honors a wife or a woman of noble character. In the Hebrew text, now this poem appears in the form of an acrostic. That is, the first word of each couplet begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The poem is also chiastic in structure, which means, like we had lesson week before last, which means that it builds to a central idea in the middle of the poem that echoes the building blocks in reverse order. So in other words, that first and the last lines are parallel, the second and next to last lines are parallel, and so forth to the middle. So let's read the verses, our focus verses today, which are verses 10 through 16 of chapter 31, and then we're going to skip down to verses 23 through 31. Verse 10, who can find a wife of noble character? She is far more precious than jewels. Verse 11, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will not lack anything good. Verse 12, she rewards him with good, not evil, all the days of her life. Verse 13, she selects wool and flax and works with her willing hands. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from far away. Verse 15, she rises while it is still night and provides food for her household and portions for her female servants. Verse 16, she evaluates a field and buys it. She plants a vineyard with her earnings. Now we jump to verse 23 in the same chapter 31. Her husband is known at the city gates where he sits among the elders of the land. Verse 24, she makes and sells linen garments. She delivers belts to the merchants. Verse 25, strength and honor are her clothing, and she can laugh at the time to come. Her mouth speaks wisdom, and loving instruction is on her tongue. Verse 27, she watches over the activities of her household and is never idle. Verse 28, her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. Verse 29, many women have done noble deeds, but you surpass them all. Verse 30, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. Verse 31, give her the reward of her labor and let her works praise her at the city gates. You know, I can remember the first time, of course I probably heard this on and off my entire, childhood and then adolescence and then young adulthood. But the time that these particular verses had the greatest impact on me was at Mother's Day, 1989, in Memorial Baptist Church. I had gone to Memorial to attend Mother's Day services with my mother, and Matthew was about 8, 9 months old. And suddenly, it was like I had an epiphany about my role as a Christian mother, as a Christian partner, as as a Christian wife. Now, I'm not going to tell you that made me made me straighten up and fly right, but I can tell you that it did help me in my focus of my goals towards as we grow and in our journey, in our sanctification. So let's go back and unpack these a little bit, break them down into these subgroups, and the author calls this first subgroup, which is verses 10 through 12, as commitment to her husband. Now, Lemuel characterized the excellent wife as one who has gained the trust of her husband, knowing she is committed to helping him succeed all her days. Who can find a wife of noble character? She is far more precious than jewels. So this rhetorical question launches this poem. Who can find a wife of noble character? Now, the King James calls it a virtuous woman. I like that better. The form of the question does not necessarily suggest that such a wife is rare. Rather, it indicates that she is to be highly valued once she's found. Now, that Hebrew word rendered wife or woman in the King James was used to refer to either a woman or a wife, depending on the context. So this dual function of this word is set forth in the creation narrative back in Genesis. Now, observing that the first man had no helper who corresponded to him, God then created the woman to become the man's human partner. Now, together, they were able to bear offspring and populate the earth, fulfilling the divine mandate to steward the earth and govern all of the fish, the birds, and the animals that God had created. So, Lemuel characterized this excellent wife and woman as one who had gained the trust of her husband. Now, this kind of familial and relational trust begins with recognizing the inestimable value of a godly woman. Lemuel's question, who can find a wife of noble character? Well, it implies that finding a wife of noble character was a rarity. Further, Lemuel argued that finding a woman of noble character is far more precious than jewels. So recognizing the inestimable value of a godly woman is critical to the success of a marriage built on mutual love and respect. So just as a successful, God-glorifying marriage requires the humble servant leadership of a godly husband, so too it requires the character and the commitment of a godly woman. Verse 11, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will not lack anything good. So that poem first highlights the foundational benefit of a godly marriage. The heart of her husband trusts in her. So the reason now the Apostle Paul could effectively use the imagery of marriage to describe Christ's relationship to the church back in Ephesians chapter 5 is that both relationships are founded on deep and abiding trust. So as he had been stated in previous sessions, in Hebrew, they thought the heart represented the seat of human volition or decision making. Thus, the husband in the poem makes a conscious decision to give himself and his future to his wife as an exclusive partner and helper. So this decision is significant for at least two reasons. First, ancient Israel, like most ancient societies, was a patriarchal society in which women typically were viewed as subordinate to women. And that's not just in ancient biblical times. That same patriarchal society exists in the Middle East today. Although the wife of noble character graciously submits to her husband's leadership of the family, she does not shy away from participating actively in work that benefits the family. And secondly, this is the only place in Scripture that extols trusting anything but God. And that's pretty interesting. However, there is no inconsistency here. This wife is a godly woman who fulfills her God-given purpose. Moreover, she fully honors the trust her husband places in her. He will not lack anything good. He shall have, the King James says, no need of spoil. So she complements him well, both in the family setting and then in the larger community. So verse 12 says, she rewards him with good, not evil, all the days of her life. So good is this value term, Here it stands in direct contrast to evil. The sense of the term evil is not limited to wicked mindsets and behavior. Rather, it encompasses anything harmful or undesirable. So the reason the husband never lacks good is because his wife's activities are consistently good. Her handiwork and her business acumen are both first-rate and profitable to the family. Yet she also is generous to the poor. Practice that strengthens the community while enhancing her family's reputation within that community. So the phrase, all the days of her life, reflects the wife's lifelong commitment to her marriage covenant. For her, marriage is a permanent relationship with her husband that can only be broken by death. So on her deathbed, the wife will be no less committed to her husband than on their wedding day. The phrase, Proverbs chapter 30, 1 verses 10 through 31, shine this bright light on God's original intention for marriage. Human customs and rituals may change through the centuries, but God's purpose does not change. The foundation of any good and godly marriage in any age remains the covenant commitment between a husband and a wife, whereby each spouse values, honors, and trusts the other. Christian couples ought to be shining examples of such a commitment. A good and godly marriage serves as a strong testimony to the power of God. The wisdom God teaches that, number one, the most important person in a home ought to be Jesus. Number two, the most important earthly relationship in the home is that of the husband and the wife. And then the most important responsibility in the home is raising godly children, if God blesses that home with children. So a godly home is a reflection of the person and the work of Jesus Christ among his people. The next subsection is wise in her work. So Lemuel pointed to the savvy skills and the prudence of the wife who wisely participates in providing for the needs of her family. Verse 13 says, she selects wool and flax and works with willing hands. Verse 14, she is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from far away. Verse 15, she rises while it is still night and provides food for her household and portions for her female servants. Verse 16, she evaluates a field and buys it. She plants a vineyard with her earnings. So in these verses, 13 through 16, girls, we must not devalue the quality and the quantity of work required to administer a successful home where everyone flourishes. Lemuel pointed to the savvy and prudence of the wife who wisely provides for her family's needs. Now, the business acumen, entrepreneurial spirit, and this wise decision-making of this woman in Proverbs 31 is breathtaking. Lemuel does not paint the picture of a woman who dutifully remains quiet and disengaged. Lemuel's mother must have been one incredible example. So the productivity of a godly woman is remarkable. She selects wool and flax. The woman was engaged in the economy as she selected and purchased the commodities and items for her family. She knew what these commodities cost and how they benefit her family. She works with willing hands. Now, she works willingly now, not begrudgingly, as if she were doing it for her family. What she was doing for her family must be tolerated and endured so she can get to that really important stuff according to the world. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. Lemuel pictured this godly woman as one seeking out the resources necessary for her family. This godly woman is not idle or lazy. She rises while it is still night. She provides food for her household and portions for her female servants. In other words, this Proverbs 31 woman rises early, works hard, and manages other people besides herself. Further, She bought and purchased land and commodities and invested in these things that produced food and provided for her family. She earned money, wisely investing what she made in things that benefited her family. Verses 17 through 22 go on now and add to the superlatives of this Proverbs 31 woman. Strength, diligence, concern for the poor, and industriousness to what is already a resume filled with relational and spiritual credentials. So this is a remarkable and a striking portrait of a godly woman. Now, Lemuel painted, and it is stunning. It is the kind of woman that is to be honored in all that she does. So Proverbs 31, compiled during Solomon's reign of 970 to 931 BC, destroys this notion that a woman who works from or at home is unproductive. Too often, women are applauded as valuable only for what they accomplish outside the family. God honors the women who work in such a way that she does in the home and outside of the home, benefits everyone in the home. So the next subsection is called Sure in Her Reputation. Lemuel described the excellent wife as having influence in the community out of people's respect for her character. He emphasized that the wife spoke and taught wisdom. Verse 23, her husband is known at the city gates, where he sits among the elders of the land. She makes and sells linen garments. She delivers belts to the merchants. 25, strength and honor are her clothing, and she can laugh at the time to come. Her mouth speaks wisdom, and loving instruction is on her tongue. Verse 27, she watches over the activities of her household, and she is never idle. Now these 4 verses, they emphasize the character of a godly woman. City gates served as the location where men would gather to conduct business and attend to legal issues. So the husband of a woman of noble character would have a superb reputation there. Because of his wife, he would be considered one of the wise elders of the city, whom everyone respected. A godly woman is indeed a benefit to her husband. As a godly woman, she is known in the marketplace as she makes and sells linen garments. She engages in commerce with integrity. The foundation of her behavior is identified here in verse 25. Strength and honor are her clothing. Rather than being defined by the beauty of her clothing, rather that being defined by she is clothed with things that never go out of style, girls. Strength and honor and dignity. A godly woman is ready for the future because she's planned for it. And so she can laugh at the time to come. Lemuel also recognized that a godly woman was a teacher, speaking wisdom and giving instruction to all within her sphere of influence. So finally, she carefully watched over the activities of her household, and she was never idle. It is this kind of woman who builds up her husband, blesses her children, benefits all of whom she is associated with, even benefiting the whole of God's people. Lemuel's description of this godly woman is grounded in the truth that right conduct comes out of right character. And then the last section is called Honored Through Fearing God, verses 28 through 31. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. So when this godly wife and mother enters a room, her children rise up. In the ancient Near East, such a response was a show of respect. The children of the excellent wife stand up in her presence, not only in recognition of her maturity, but also in honor of her overall character and success. They call her blessed, meaning she is someone who obviously displays the favor and the approval of God. Her godly choices in life shaped her character, and her conduct in these qualities overflowed as blessings to the entire household and beyond. So the woman's children are not alone in singing her praises. Her husband also praises her. He does not ridicule or complain about her. He cherishes her with virtues. He cherishes her virtues and her talents. And therefore, whenever he speaks of her, it's with respect and appreciation. The husband gladly thanks God for his wife and extols her before others. Verse 29, many women have done noble deeds, but you surpass them all. And this verse 29 could be understood as an example of the way a grateful husband praised his wife to her face. He praised his wife by telling her that she stood head and shoulders above all other women, even the many women who had done noble deeds. In essence, he called his wife the noblest of the noble. In his mind, she was the perfect woman, the perfect wife, and the perfect mother. Verse 30, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. This is one of the most popular verses of chapter 31. It's the key. This verse is the key to understanding this entire poem. The real worth of any person, whether it be a man or a woman, single or married, grows out of a right relationship with God. External attributes such as charm and physical beauty can and do change over time. Moreover, skilled deceivers can fake a charming appearance. They can act pleasantly in public, but they turn abrasive at home with their families. Further, that fleeting nature of a youthful physical appearance is evident to all. So from its opening chapter, now the book of Proverbs has declared that the one enduring quality that makes all the difference in life is the fear of the Lord. Now don't miss this, girls. Just like Brother Bill used to say, if you didn't get anything out of this message at all, don't miss this. What truly sets apart the wife of noble character is that she is a woman who fears the Lord. She has a right relationship with God. She lives with a daily awareness of His holiness and her need of forgiveness and restoration. Her faith relationship with God then shapes all of her other relationships and all of her activities in her life. Now, verse 11 says, give her the reward of her labor and let her works praise her at the city gates. Now, as a final exhortation, the poem calls for the wife's family and the community to demonstrate their appreciation for such an exemplary, godly woman. The phrase, the reward of her labor, literally reads, the fruits of her hands. She's worthy to receive the just rewards of her hard work, whether that be the work of feeding, clothing, teaching, managing the family, or the outside business interests that she has carried out. Further, she rightly deserves recognition and appreciation in the community, even from those civic leaders and the merchants at the city gates. She loves the Lord, and He blesses her with favor. Well, that's the end of Proverbs. And on a wonderful, uplifting note, we close out Proverbs. I'll see y'all in person Sunday morning, and we'll spend a couple more weeks then with King Solomon before we get our new quarterlies and move on to Isaiah, I believe. We're going to stay in the Old Testament. Okay, girls, I'm coming to you from my little cypress gardens in my bluebird sanctuary. Patty out.